November 23, 2022, Zhengzhou, China. 4 in the morning. Thousands of workers pour out of gray dormitory towers and into the dark. They rip down barricades. They flip testing booths. They stand toe-to-toe with rows of men in white hazmat suits holding riot shields, and they do not back down. This is not a political rally. Nobody out here is marching against a president or a party. They are rising up against a factory, but not just any factory. This single complex assembles roughly half of every iPhone on the planet. At full sprint, its lines can push out around 500,000 phones a day, about 350 a minute. The locals stopped calling it a factory a long time ago. They call it iPhone City. And in November 2022, iPhone City revolted. Here's why the story is bigger than one bad month at one big plant. When this factory stumbled, the most valuable company in history had to warn Wall Street. And when this factory's founder wrote one letter, the government of 1.4 billion people changed direction. That is not a supplier. That is a power center. So today we're going inside. The recruiting vans that empty out villages, the dorm rooms stacked 8 deep, the nets bolted beneath the windows, the lockdown that turned a workplace into a cage, and the uprising that cracked it open. Because this was never really a story about phones. It's a story about the invisible machine that modern wealth runs on. Who feeds it? Who owns it? And what each side gets paid. You're holding the product. Let's meet the people who made it. Every empire starts small, and this one starts embarrassingly small, with the channel knob on a black and white television. In 1974, a 23-year-old in Taiwan named Harry Go borrows a few $1,000s, most of it from his mother, and opens a workshop making plastic parts. The company is called Honhai. Nobody can pronounce it, and nobody needs to, because Go's strategy is to be invisible. While other founders chase glamorous products, he chases the boring ones: knobs, cables, and then the part that changes everything: connectors, the tiny sockets that join one electronic component to another. When the video game boom hit, Honhai is making connectors for Atari joysticks. When the personal computer arrives, it's inside those two. Go's bet is simple: brands come and go, but everything electronic needs the boring part, and whoever makes the boring part cheapest at scale quietly becomes essential. In 1988, he makes the move that turns a parts shop into an empire. He opens a factory across the strait in Shenzhen, mainland China, where land is cheap, the government is hungry for investment, and millions of young people from the countryside will work for a fraction of Taiwanese wages. The trading name he picks for the West is the one you know: Foxconn. The Shenzhen campus, Longhua, grows into something the world has never seen: a walled company town of over 200,000 workers, with its own hospital, its own fire brigade, its own bakeries and bank. Then in the 2000s comes the client that changes history: Apple. And in 2007, the iPhone. Suddenly, Foxconn isn't assembling a gadget. It's assembling the most profitable object ever mass-produced. By 2010, coastal wages are rising. So Foxconn does what this machine always does: it moves toward cheaper hours. It goes inland to Zhengzhou, the capital of Hunan province. 100 million people, millions of them farm families whose kids need cash income. And the local government rolls out a red carpet you would not believe: roads, power, subsidies, worker dormitories. They even set up a special customs zone inside the fence so a finished iPhone can legally exit China without ever leaving the property. Local officials help run the hiring drives. The state doesn't just permit iPhone City. The state is a partner in it. Zoom out and the scale gets absurd. At its peak, Foxconn has well over 1 million workers on payroll in China, the population of a small country, employed by one company. And it's not just iPhones. It builds devices for nearly every brand in your house: game consoles, laptop, e-readers, servers, smart speakers. If it has a chip in it, there's a decent chance it passed through these hands. The most important company most people have never thought about. But an empire like this runs on one input above everything else: an endless supply of people willing to trade their hours for a wage that nobody at headquarters would ever accept for themselves. So let's talk about what those hours actually look like. You're 19. You grew up in a farming county a few hours from Zhengzhou. Your parents grow wheat. There's a younger sibling still in school. The family needs cash, not someday, now. And everyone knows where the cash is. The recruiter barely interviews you. A valid ID, a quick health check, show you can read a string of letters and numbers off a card. That's the bar. By the weekend, you have a badge, a bunk in a dorm you'll share with 7 strangers, a meal card, and a base salary of around $350 a month. $350 to build a device that sells for $1,000. Your first morning, you shuffle through turnstiles with thousands of others, pass security check, into a hall the size of an aircraft hangar. Someone hands you a smock, a hairnet, finger cup, and then you meet your real boss. The line: here is your entire job. A phone chassis arrives in front of you. You seat one screw, or you polish one edge, or you snap in one one camera module and check it for dust. 6 to 10 seconds. Then the next one arrives. And the next. Do that 1,000 times. And you finished the first 2 hours of a 10 to 12-hour shift. Talking gets you worn. Sitting is for the lucky stations. Bathroom breaks need a path. Your output is tracked hour by hour, and labor watchdogs have documented what can happen when you slip. Written self-criticisms read out in front of your team, or standing at attention as punishment. Not every line, not every manager, but often enough that the reports keep coming year after year. Now here's the part that matters most for this channel, the wage design. Because that low base pay is not an accident. It's set right around survival level on purpose. The real money is overtime. On paper, overtime is capped by law. In practice, during iPhone season, the cap is a suggestion. So when your line leader asks if you'll take 60, 80 extra hours this month, you say yes. Everyone says yes. Saying no marks you as replaceable, and there is a literal line of applicants outside the gate ready to prove it. With maximum overtime during the autumn ramp, when the new iPhone has to hit shelves in every country on Earth at the same moment, you might clear $600 or $700 in a month. Then the season ends, the hours evaporate, and your paycheck falls off a cliff. You can't plan a life on this income. You can only survive on it. Notice something strange about your new life. Your entire year now bends around a keynote in California. Some executive walks onto a stage in September, holds up a rectangle, and 10,000 miles away your shifts double, your wrists ache, and your dorm fills with fresh strangers. When the launch fever cools in spring, the plant sheds workers like a tree sheds leaves, and the company knows exactly how to refill it. It pays referral bonuses, turning every worker into a recruiter. So you call your cousins, your classmates, the kid down the road, and the machine feeds itself. In the city outside the gate, an entire economy of noodle stalls, internet cafes, and cheap phone shops lives and dies on that same rhythm. One product, one launch calendar, a million heartbeats synced to it. Back at the dorm, you climb to your bunk past 7 roommates working 7 different shifts. Someone's alarm goes off at 4 a.m. Someone else just got in. You are 19, away from home for the first time in your life. One anonymous face among 200,000, doing a task designed so that any human alive could replace you by tomorrow morning. The turnover numbers tell you everything. The plant burns through workers so fast that recruiting never stops. A permanent hiring operation feeding a permanent exodus. And the phone you complete 1,000 times a day? At your wage, owning one cost close to 2 months of your life. For years, the world mostly shrugged at all of this. Cheap phones, far away, someone else's kid. Then, in 2010, the workers started going to the roof. The first name the world learned was Sun Danong. Summer 2009. Sun is 25, a rural kid who tested into a good university and landed what looked like a golden job at Foxconn, handling logistics for Apple prototypes. 16 next-generation iPhones pass through his hands. One goes missing. What follows, according to his friends and later reporting, interrogation by factory security, his apartment search, and allegations, which the company denied, that he was beaten. His last messages to his girlfriend were an apology and a plea not to tell his family. On July 16, 2009, Sunday Danong fell from the 12th floor of his building. He was 25 years old. Apple called the news saddening. Foxconn expressed regret. And the machine rolled on straight into the darkest year in its history. 2010, the iPhone 4 ramp. Orders explode, and overtime explodes with them. And at the Shenzhen megacampus, young workers begin jumping from the dormitories. January, March, April, May. At one point, multiple deaths within weeks of each other. By the end of the year, at least 14 Foxconn workers are dead by suicide, most of them between 17 and 25 years old. More survive attempts, some with injuries they will carry forever. The world's media finally shows up at the gate, and Foxconn responds. Wages go up meaningfully. A counseling hotline opens. Psychologists are brought in. Workers are asked to sign written pledges promising not to harm themselves. And then the company installs its most honest piece of infrastructure. Not a reform, not a policy. Net, wide steel and mesh nets bolted onto the dormitories and factory buildings, stretching out over the pavement to catch falling bodies. Apple's founder, pressed about it at a tech conference, pushed back hard on the word sweatshop and pointed out, accurately, that the campus suicide rate was actually below national averages. Statistically defensible, humanly beside the point. Because a campus of healthy young adults, medically screened at hiring, should have a rate far below average. And because the deaths didn't cluster randomly, they clustered under the crushing overtime of an iPhone launch. But here is the turn in the story. The moment despair started converting into something else. Leverage. January 2012, at a Foxconn plant in Wuhan building game consoles, around 150 workers climb onto a roof together and threaten to jump, not out of individual hopelessness, but as an ultimatum in a pay dispute. Officials talk them down. Concessions follow. Read that again. In this system, a single worker worker's voice carried so little weight that the only way to be heard was to threaten everything together publicly where the cameras could see. Now, Apple didn't do nothing. It published a supplier code of conduct. It joined the Fair Labor Association and opened these factories to outside auditors, and those audits confirmed what workers had been saying all along: overtime far beyond legal limits, unpaid meetings, safety gaps. Real improvements followed. So did relapses. Watchdog groups kept catching illegal overtime during launch ramps and vocational school, interns, teenagers, working night shifts on the line to hit iPhone deadline. And to be fair, the decade after 2010 did change things. Base wages roughly doubled. Dorms got renovated. Counselors stayed on staff. If you compare iPhone City to the worst factories on Earth, it isn't close to the bottom. That's precisely what makes it such a clean case study. This is the good version of the system. The audited version. The version with a code of conduct taped to the wall. And even the good version needed a rule against teenagers on night shift, a cap on overtime that kept getting broken, and a way to catch falling bodies. Because through all of it, the pledges, the audit, the press cycles, one thing never came down. The net. Remember the net. They are the perfect symbol of how this machine solves its problems. It doesn't remove the fall. It just catches you before the damage becomes visible. To understand the uprising, you first need to understand the policy. Zero COVID. The rule that governed China for nearly 3 years. One positive case could seal a building. A handful could freeze a district. Mass testing, central quarantine camp, and a phone app that decided whether you were allowed through any door in the country. For factories, there was a special invention called the closed loop. Workers live where they work. Nobody in, nobody out until the outbreak is cleared. The fence stops being a property line and becomes the border of your entire world. October 2022. Cases surface inside iPhone City at the worst possible moment. The peak production ramp for the iPhone 14 Pro, the one product carrying Apple's entire holiday quarter. The loop slams shut around 200,000 people. The canteens close. Meals arrive in plastic bags left at dorm doors, sometimes late, sometimes cold, sometimes, workers said, not at all. Colleagues who test positive are bused to hastily converted quarantine sites. Floors mix the sick and the healthy. And because official information is locked down as tight as the campus, rumor becomes the only news source, and rumor spreads faster than any virus. Videos begin leaking out, garbage piling up in corridors, scuffles over food deliveries, people shouting from windows. Then fear beats the fence. In late October, workers start climbing the barriers and walking out. With travel locked down, there are no buses or trains to catch, so they walk down highway shoulders and through harvested wheat fields, suitcases dragging behind them, some covering 50, 60 miles or more to reach their home villages. And along those roads, something quietly beautiful happens. Villagers set out tables with bottled water, bread, and steamed buns free for strangers they'd never met. Those images traveled around the world. Foxconn now has a crisis because the iPhone 14 Pro is built almost nowhere else on Earth, so it launches a hiring blitz. Bonuses get jacked up. Daily pay rates climb. And the state steps in as chief recruiter. Townships are handed quotas, and veterans and party members are urged to answer the call. Within about 2 weeks, roughly 100,000 new recruits sign up. They arrive to find the exact same closed loop the last workforce fled. And then, on the night of November 22nd, the new hires read the fine print. The bonus terms in their contract don't match what the recruiters promised. The payouts have been pushed months down the road. Stack that on top of the terror of being bunked near infected coworkers, and at 4 in the morning on November 23rd, it detonates. Crowds face off with hazmat-suited security. Videos show workers being beaten to the ground, and workers fighting back, tearing down barriers, smashing testing kiosks, chanting for their pay. By daylight, iPhone City looks like a battlefield in factory smog. The next day, Foxconn apologizes and blames a technical error in the contracts. Then it makes the offer that ends the standoff, 10,000 yuan, about $1,400 for any new hire willing to simply quit and go home. Thousands take the deal. Buses line up to carry away the very workforce the company had just spent a fortune recruiting. Now count the fallout. Apple issues a rare mid-quarter warning to investors. The plant is running at significantly reduced capacity, and iPhone 14 Pro shipments will come in lower than expected, weeks before Christmas. Wire services report internal estimates that the month's output could fall by as much as a third, and analysts peg the holiday shortfall in the millions of units. Billions in market value wobble with every headline. And what does Apple's CEO say about the human beings at the center of it? A few weeks later, a reporter catches him in a hallway in Washington and asks, point blank, about the workers who were beaten for protesting the lockdown. He keeps walking. She asks again. Not a word. The man whose company posts an annual report about supplier responsibility with a camera in his face and one question on the table chooses silence. Sometimes silence is the whole answer. And then comes the ending nobody saw coming. Weeks later, according to reporting by the Wall Street Journal, Foxconn's billionaire founder writes directly to China's top leadership with a warning: keep zero COVID in place, and China risks losing its crown as the world's factory, because supply chains that leave do not come back. Now, he wasn't the only pressure. That same month, after a deadly apartment fire in Urumqi, protests broke out in cities across China, the boldest public dissent in a generation. But the reporting suggests that letter from that company landed with real weight in the rooms where decisions get made. And in early December 2022, zero COVID, the defining policy of an era, enforced on 1.4 billion people for 3 years, was dismantled almost overnight. Sit with that for a second. A phone assembler helped move the policy of a superpower. That is what it means to make yourself indispensable. And it forces the question this entire story has been building toward. If the factory has that much leverage over a government, why do the people inside it have so little? The answer is a machine older than Foxconn, older than Apple. It's called labor arbitrage, and it is the quiet engine of the entire modern economy. The recipe has 3 steps. Buy labor where hours are cheap. Sell products where incomes are high. Keep the spread. Run the iPhone through it. Teardown analysts estimate that final assembly, the human hands part, adds somewhere between $10 and $30 to a phone that retails for $1,000 or more. The most valuable consumer product on earth, and the people who physically put it together are a rounding error on the receipt. Now flip the thought experiment, and to be clear, this is back-of-the-envelope math, not an audit. Picture the ecosystem assembling Apple's product, hundreds of thousands of contract workers. In Zhengzhou, a worker's total cost, wages, overtime, dorm, meals, might run $6,000 to $8,000 a year. The fully loaded cost of an equivalent factory worker in the United States, wages, healthcare, insurance, payroll taxes, starts somewhere around $80,000 to $100,000. Move even 700,000 workers from the first column to the second, and you've added something on the order of $50 billion a year in cost, measured against roughly $100 billion a year in profit. Half the empire's earnings erased by a single line item. That's why nobody at the top ever seriously considers it. The spread is not a flaw in the model. The spread is the model. Now, honesty requires a complication, because this stopped being purely about cheap a long time ago. Apple's CEO has argued for years that China's real advantage became skill, an unmatched density of tooling engineers, and a supplier cluster where nearly every component of a phone exists within a few hours' drive. He's not wrong. You cannot simply airlift iPhone City to Ohio. And here's the genuinely uncomfortable part. The machine is also a ladder. This same arbitrage is how poor regions have gotten richer for 2 centuries. It industrialized Japan, then Taiwan, then coastal China. Shenzhen assembly wages roughly tripled over 15 years, which is exactly why Foxconn moved inland to Zhengzhou in the first place. And when Zhengzhou's cost rose and its risks exploded in 2022, the machine did what the machine always does. It moved. Since the uprising, Apple has pushed assembly into India and Vietnam at record speed. Today, roughly 1 in 5 iPhones is put together in India, and that number climbs every quarter. New gates, new dorms, new 19-year-olds with duffel bags, different flag, same spread. And waiting past all of it, automation. Lines that need fewer human hands per phone every single year, until one day the arbitrage runs out of humans to arbitrage. One more thing, because the internet loves to slap the word slavery on this, and precision matters. Legally, it isn't. Nobody is in chains. Workers walk through that gate by choice, and for a lot of families, this wage genuinely beats the farm. But look honestly at the ingredients. People with no better options. Contract terms you can't verify until you're inside the fence. And an employer whose alternative to you is an infinite line at the gate. Coercion doesn't always need a whip. Sometimes a wage floor, a fence, and a total absence of alternatives will do the job. So call it what it is. A system that's voluntary in the letter and cornered in the spirit. And don't make the mistake of thinking this is an Apple story. Run the same recipe on your closet, sewn in Dhaka for a few dollars a day, sold in a mall for $50. Run it on the chocolate bar at the checkout, cocoa picked in West Africa by farmers earning $1 or $2 a day. Run it on the rubber gloves in the hospital, the shrimp in the freezer aisle, the servers streaming this very video into your phone. Different product, different fences, identical spread. Once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Almost everything cheap in your life is cheap because somebody's hours were. Which brings us finally to you. Here is the wealth gap lesson buried inside iPhone City. And it's bigger than Apple, bigger than China. Every economy on earth has 2 seats at the table. There are people who sell hours, and there are people who own the spread between what those hours cost and what the output sells for. The entire game of building wealth is the slow, deliberate journey from the first seat toward the second. And don't think the arbitrage stops at the factory fence. The same machine is pricing you right now. Remote work prices your hours against the entire planet. AI prices them against software. The lesson isn't fear. The lesson is understand the machine because it absolutely understands you. So take 3 things from Zhengzhou. First, leverage beats effort. Those workers did some of the hardest labor imaginable, and they were truly heard exactly once, the moment they acted together and became scarce. Effort is the entry fee. Scarcity, rare skills, ownership, and audience options is what actually gets paid. Second, own something, even something small. A skill that can't be commoditized. A stake in a business. Assets that earn while you sleep. Owners collect the spread. Sellers of hours pay it. Every dollar you invest is a quiet defection from the first seat to the second. Third, see clearly. The next time a $1,000 phone lands in your hand, you'll know what's actually inside it. A few dollars of human labor, a few $100s of parts, and an ocean of spread in between. You don't have to drown in guilt about it. You do have to see it. Because people who can't see the machine tend to spend their whole lives inside it, wondering why they never get ahead. Tonight, in Zhengzhou, the floodlights are on. The nets are still bolted beneath the windows. And somewhere on a line that never stops, a 19-year-old is seating one screw every few seconds into a device that costs 2 months of their life. The machine is real. You don't get to opt out of the economy it built, but you do get to choose what you're inside it. Another pair of hands, or someone who finally sees the whole board. That's the wealth gap. And now you've seen one of its factories.